Assault and silence me for 4 years. Enjoy what's coming. So, some backstory. My freshman year of high school I was sexually assaulted by a peer, and so was another girl. I kept it to myself because we had a lot of mutual friends and I didn't want them to be uncomfortable or feel like they had to choose a side. I also felt like I was responsible, and it made me feel really guilty. I also suffered a lot of psychological repercussions. I began cutting, I developed severe anxiety and depression. Finally it peaked and I forced myself to tell my English teacher. The police were called, I was interviewed. Already I could tell the detective was not taking me seriously. He also blatantly misquoted me in the statement and used words like misunderstanding, and, he went in for a kiss, even though I made it very clear I struggled and tried to push him away, and he had me pinned to the wall with his hand around my throat. He confessed after 10 minutes of being interviewed by the police. The charges got dropped by the prosecutor because he felt the case would never go to trial. He was a star student and was very well respected. After this he was banned from speaking at school-sanctioned events. I was still quiet because I'm not a rock-the-boat type person. Eventually I found out he was planning on going to the same college I was going to. I wrote him a letter, asking him to please reconsider. He had said he was very sorry earlier. I told him in the letter to put his money where his mouth is and prove it. He never replied. A few weeks later I find out he's planning to speak at a baccalaureate event put on by a local interfaith community. I emailed the teacher in charge and told her what happened and politely asked her to not allow him to speak. She emailed back and essentially said, "That's terrible. I'm so sorry. We're still going to let him speak though. Feel better." I'm livid at this point. I've been dismissed, belittled, ignored, and unheard for years despite my efforts to get justice. He's still incredibly popular and everyone loves him. I decide I've done all I can. I tried to take care of things on the down low. Talked to him privately to come to an agreement. Talked to the organizer to try and come to an agreement. They both ignored me just like the police did. So I decide I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I attend the baccalaureate event, and while he's giving his speech, ironically about treating others with respect, LOL, I hold up a sign that says, "Redacted, has assaulted 2 women." Is this the face of class of 2020? Stop giving assaulters and abusers a platform to speak. Stop silencing women. By the time the event is over, everyone is talking about it, and everyone is pissed at both him and the organizers for letting him speak. Many of the girls there are victims of sexual assault themselves, and they are all furious that the organization knowingly let a predator speak. I feel incredible. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The last thing he told me after he'd finished violating me was, "Don't tell anyone." And even after years had passed and I felt comfortable speaking about it to a select few, and the police knew, and all the teachers knew, he was still praised. And every time I heard someone talk about him fondly, I heard that little voice from deep inside me saying, "You're letting him win." Now that everyone knows and everyone hates him, I know that finally, I can lay this matter to bed. I can finally let go. Edit. I would like to address a few things. I have gotten a lot of direct messages, as well as comments on this post, from survivors of sexual assault telling me how brave I am and how I'm their hero. I appreciate that so much. You have no idea how happy that makes my heart. But I have something to say, to all of you who said that. Yes, it was scary and hard to hold up the sign. I am not saying that wasn't a brave thing to do. It was, and I'm proud of myself. However, I don't like what that implies. I don't like the implication that a survivor who is not yet ready to share their story choosing to keep it private is in any way an act of cowardice. My friends, you are all brave. You are kind. You are compassionate. You are strong. You are resilient. You are intelligent. You are brave. Be your own hero, my friends. I love you all. Remember, you either die the hero or leave long enough to see yourself become the villain. So, the long-awaited update. I woke up this morning to 70+ messages and DMs from classmates. Every single one overwhelmingly positive, supportive, and empathetic. 2 other victims have come out. Now his sexual assault count is at 4. However, I want to make this as efficient as possible. Any suggestions on how to make sure we have a solid case would be very much appreciated. I haven't heard any statements from him yet, but I promise I'm as eager to know as you are. You'll be the first to hear about it if and when it arrives. Thank you all for your support. 5 years later. Nuclear revenge on an abusive pedophile is so sweet. So I'm new to Reddit here. Honestly, I only created this account so I could share my story. For the YouTubers who share the Reddit stories, I love them, I want this one shared. In the event my abuser sees this shared online, he won't be able to link it back to me and will only be able to sit there and stew in his own anger with no recourse. Backstory. Trigger warning. I was adopted as a child and was abused in many ways. I won't go into the exact details here, but my background led me into the relationship this story is about. As it was, I did not learn what a good and loving relationship should be like and was not able to recognize being groomed as a late teen by a much older man. Enter a/pedophile psychotic narcissist, a P for short. Not one of the family but came along after I left the abusive home. These happenings took place over the course of the following 15 years after I left the abusive home. He was 32 and I was not quite 19 yet. I am now 38. I ended up being whisked away from the only real family I knew, sis, mom, and dad. No blood relation, but I was their unofficially adopted daughter, to California. From the beginning I noticed some things were off when I was being groomed, but didn't know to recognize the signs of grooming. 2 years into the relationship the abuse really started in earnest. Over the course of our travels and problems, I noticed that he would talk incessantly online with other women. He even made it a point to tell me about one that turned him on at a job site. He worked telecom construction jobs. I also caught him online with a 16-year-old, he told me, amidst severe paleness and sweating, stammering, and fear. At this point it was like having to take care of an adult-aged baby who had to have things his way all the time. I enjoyed when he left for weeks on end, sometimes months for work. It meant that I didn't have to deal with his annoying self all the time. Just to clarify why I say it was like taking care of an adult-aged baby. He would literally shit himself and drip it all over the floor on his way to the bathroom and then make me clean it up. This happened all the time. That's just one example. He would throw the Christmas tree more often than not during some argument or another during the holidays, so I started not putting one out. Throwing things, breaking furniture and punching holes in walls, sexual abuse and those sorts of things. About 8 years into the relationship, AP ended up getting an inheritance from an uncle who passed away in his family, and so started the "if you ever take my money and leave, I'll find you and kill you" threats. He was big into guns and had many. Mind you, this is a man who is a severely paranoid psychopath. Which I eventually learned that he was a paranoid schizophrenic via his ex-wife I found on Facebook. It was then I really tried to find a way out. It was difficult because he kept moving me around the US to different places in several states. So the last place he forced me to move to was Missouri. Enter the 3,000 square foot home that he made me co-sign for. I hated it. I had to keep it spotless, which also meant running after AP, constantly picking up around him and cleaning. I was also working part-time, and doing college full-time. The problems got worse at this point, as this is about the time I found him online with the 16-year-old minor. This is when it really dawned on me he was grooming someone else. He also would force me to talk to his then current girlfriend whenever she called at the time too. All this was adding up, and since we were finally in a big city, I knew I could find a way to leave since there were resources out there. AP decided he was going to go on a trip with a friend out of state, so that's when I planned to leave. I planned ahead, let the shelter know the situation, when to expect me, and if I didn't show to call the police after 24 to 48 hours of no show. I hid copies of my social security card and birth certificate too. AP figured out something was up and ended up not going. I was a day late in getting to the shelter, but I made it. It was a violent fight that night and I ended up leaving injured with nothing but the clothes on me, my hat, jacket and some cigarettes. Oh, and my hidden identification copies. The Nuclear Revenge. Part 1. Once I got to the shelter I used one day to decompress. Then the revenge plan started. All the utilities, including the cell service, was in my name. Yep, I called and cancelled them all. The utility companies are required to give a 7-day disconnect notice to the occupant to allow them time to get utilities in their name. So I knew AP would have problems with this because he had terrible credit and hence the reason why everything was in my name. The cell service was immediate however, which meant he no longer had a phone to use for work. The cable company, I also put a password on the pay-per-view so he couldn't rack it up with P. I did call my bank and let them know but was unaware at the time that he could still cash a check. Which he did do and forged my name. More on that later. So after I got everything cancelled, I knew it was time to find a place and start over and finish getting my revenge and life back. Luckily I had a friend, we'll call him Dave. More on a surprising detail about Dave later, in Ohio, who offered me a place to stay. I used my last paycheck to grab a bus ticket and hightailed it out of there. Part 2. Once I arrived in Ohio and settled in, I started taking stock of my options. Dave is a retired law enforcement / military / doctor / martial arts practitioner. So much there that he's done, but it comes in handy later too in more ways than one. He helped me to figure out my options, let me know our local laws, and helped me in finding the right type of attorney to help me. He also helped me in documenting everything that AP decided to do once he figured out where I had gone. And AP did try. AP even sent someone to our home to threaten to kill us, AP tirelessly stalked, sent threatening emails, etc. Part 3. With documentation in hand and a 15-page typed statement, I called up a local Missouri attorney, we'll call him A1, who ended up being amazing and he helped me take care of all the filings I needed to do. AP and I were together barely shy of 10 years in Missouri as a common law state. I had to go through a legal separation to sever everything we had in Missouri. A1 ended up getting me an excellent judgment against him as well as a warrant for his arrest for that county. The documentation of his erratic, threatening behavior still continued. Part 4. AP was so scared that he ran away. He ran back to California and ended up getting married. Enter my attorneys, A2, A3, and AP's, 2 attorneys. A2 on my end ended up a flop so I hired A3. AP's first attorney I had taken off the case since he had represented both of us during the house purchase, he really thought I was that stupid to allow that to go under the radar. Due to the judgment amount I ended up hiring an attorney who dealt with judgments $40,000 and above, normally for businesses. My judgment wasn't much below that amount so he took my case. The amount was also coincidentally very close to the amount he still had left from his inheritance. I asked A1 to ask for that amount since it was all he had left of his inheritance. He filed a sister state judgment so that the interest and judgment were moved to California for me. A3 got AP's second attorney to drop him since they were colleagues at one point. AP no longer had any legal representation and tried to represent himself from this point on. And boy did AP make a fool of himself trying to represent himself. Part 5. Enter my private investigator, later on turned friend, that A1 recommended. He enjoyed that case because of the situation behind it. Private investigator hates abusers like him. Private investigator found him in California and we ended up finding all AP's personal address information, etc., because he was arrested for domestic violence on his pregnant wife. We were able to serve him during his court hearing on his wife's case via a bailiff. Oh, to have been a fly on the wall. Remember above I said that I had found out AP had forged my signature and cashed a check on my bank account? Yeah, I also had all the proof from that and had him out and out on check fraud and forgery as an ace in the hole if I ever needed it, which A3 was also provided as well. The last act. With all my proof in hand, AP also knew I had him on check fraud and forgery should the need arise. The judgments and the warrants, a second warrant was about to be issued in California on him as well from me and A3, he finally offered to settle. In the end, I still got the same amount of my judgment plus court costs. He never realized that that was what I was aiming for. He always said if I ever took his money and left him he would find me and kill me. I still got his money and he never did anything to me. It took 5 years, but damn if I wasn't going to fight tooth and nail to nail this bastard for what he put me through. It was amazing being able to nail him with some sweet nuclear revenge for 10 years of abuse. Between myself, Dave, and A3, he was so scared that he wouldn't even go into A3's office to hand over the payment for the settlement. He made someone else do it. Dave and I took his money, renovated our home, bought Dave a pickup truck, me a replacement Honda Pilot since AP stole mine before, some other miscellaneous things that AP would have hated, And finally got my Korean sky dragon tattoo sleeve done. The sky dragon was something he always wanted done on him but was too chicken crap to handle the pain. We made great use of that money. For a 6 feet, blonde-haired, 400-pound man, he became obsessed with food during the course of our relationship and added 200 pounds. He ended up being a whimpering, terrified crybaby. Not bad for an abuse survivor who put up with 10 years of abuse. Oh, and Dave and I have been together now for 9 years, married for 6.5 of them. TLDR. I was groomed by a pedophile and spent 10 years being abused with him. After finally escaping, I spent 5 years fighting back, and forced him to pay me tens of thousands of dollars in return. In the end, he was afraid of me. How the hell was the abuser not jailed? Especially knowing he's grooming underage girls. I wouldn't be able to rest until he was behind bars. If you're not an abuse survivor, you probably wouldn't understand. It was extremely difficult to get as far as I did in getting him into court as it was. If he had continued in his course rather than choosing to settle, then yes, I would have been able to get him jailed. I chased him through 2 states, the laws for both were very different. And the reasoning why I want Reddit-related channels to pick it up is so that this is shared far and wide. I deliberately gave no real names, and only state names. If the a-hole does see this, he'll know it's about him but he won't be able to pursue anything over it. Hence why I hope it is picked up by other people.